If there was a four-letter word to describe Suci, it is not holy or pure. It is wild. Hello Internet, Ratu here, a hot mess reader, and today I will be talking about the newly released FIXI book called Suci, but written by Hadi M Nor. This is a collaboration between BooktubeMyLasia and FIXI, a local publishing house in Malaysia where they publish uniquely yet simplistic one-liner titles of urban, contemporary and pulp fictions. And I can't thank you enough BooktubeMyLasia and FIXI for providing me a copy of this book in exchange for an honest review.
Suci is the first installment in what's to come of a trilogy series. It is a story set in a post-apocalyptic Malaysia where Adan, the male protagonist of the story, and a bunch of group of teenagers his age who are all part of a warrior group under the leadership of an old man named Pak Hassan. Adan and his group, who have completed their 5 years of training, are tasked to set out of the comfort of their village and begin their warrior duties. And from that day onwards, they would truly learn what it means to survive as an adult.
I don't read much FIXI books. In fact, this is the first one that I finished reading it, so good job to me. But don't get me wrong, I've always been wanting to read FIXI books. I just never find the ones that interest me or vibe with me. And even when it was intriguing, I DNF it, and well, here we are. So big disclaimer here. A lot of them, of what I'm going to say, is going to be solely based on my opinions and minor spoiler inducing. Finally, my first impression of the book is great. It's a trilogy, and I have problems in committing to a series. That's my issue, not the book. And because of that, I am painfully aware that a lot of my questions will not be answered. But I do expect that a lot of the first conflict or the male protagonist in this story's main or base conflict of the series will be resolved. From the blurb, it felt like it was going to be a post-apocalyptic or dystopian-ish kind of setting. Early in the story, we are introduced to Adan, an average teenage boy who is one of Pak Hassan's warriors or soldiers. And I gotta say, he really has his priorities straight. You'd think Adan, who has been training all his 5 years life, would expect to have some kind of survival mode like Katniss Everdeen, but no. Apparently, he has a crush towards Erina, one of the female warriors in his group. And I gotta say, and I know it's FIXI style, and also not uncommon in Western writing too, and I gotta give credit, is that he really portrays, or Adan really sounds like a hormonal teenage boy. Personally, I don't need to know the thought process of Adan being biologically affected by Erina's snake. No thanks. But the instances such as these are quite minimal, so thank God. We slowly establish the settings of Adan's world. There is a belief system introduced. Adan and his friends and also the village where he came from believe in this Puasa Suci Alam. They have some recitations in their prayers and in their beliefs, and in their belief they recognize those true elements that arose from the damages of the world. One is a monster being called Makhluk, and another is the phenomena, which aligns with the title, called penyucian. To describe how their current world state came to be. Very interesting, this concept, because it basically calling or explains the wipeout of the world civilization as a form of cleansing or purification. Literacy in this world is not high, not many can read, well, except for our bookish protagonist Adan. But it makes sense because it seems books or the art of writing or record keeping no longer exists, and only what remains are books that were not affected or managed to be salvaged from the penyucian. In fact, there are many books mentioned or referred to be such as Robinson Crusoe, Turunnya Sebuah Bendera from Usman Awang, Muhammad, the biography of our last prophet of Islam, and a novel called Salina. I thought that was a nice touch, and also good use of foreshadowing and symbolism. And looking back, I think there are some running themes here within this bookish reference about survival, Mother Nature, the duality of solitude and independence, fighting for freedom, and clashes of belief. Either these books are just merely serve as a nod to the past or to the reader, or a reminder for Adan and for what's to come. Another poignant scene or motif that I would like to discuss is that they similarly remind me of Attack on Titan series, where they use the sea and greenery motif. The scene where the characters reach the seashore reflected serenity, peace, and the dream of the youth venturing outside and beyond the sea. Then there's also the state of the world itself, which based on Adan's belief is that the power of nature purified the world into ruin, but the world will still continue spinning, regardless, and that humans should move forward as well. And let's not forget the flower growing on those makhluk beings. Perhaps they're here to symbolize that in the midst of all the violence and bloodshed, flowers continue to bloom beautifully. This is the same with Attack on Titans, mind you. They always depict flowers in the midst of chaos, reminding us a beautiful gift of nature among the stench of death. Personally, I think Hadi M Nor did a splendid job in his writing. There is cohesion, the lines flow seamlessly and with purpose. All the scenes have purpose for the next one or later on in the chapters, which shows a lot of care, planning and details went on in crafting this piece. Basically, it reads like watching a movie or a series in my head, and I must commend the action sequence. The pacing did not lose momentum for fast scenes such as fight and battle scenes in this story. It really kept me engaged. The dialogues didn't feel stiff, and overall it was wild at the end, like in a good way. Not sure if this is attributed to Hadi M Nor being a scriptwriter in TV shows such as Oh My English that give him that edge. Story-wise, and this is just me, I kind of could predicted the major reveal of the villain in the story and was not surprised by the key death. Maybe I'm heartless, or maybe I have strong mental fortitude, because the moment it's a dystopian-ish story, I close my heart off. Don't get attached to any of those characters. But alas, I do have a favorite. We have Adan, our protagonist. He's bookish, quiet, kind, and sensible, but considered to be weak. He's basically reminded me of Kaneki-ken from Tokyo Ghoul. Yes, I'm using a lot of anime reference. Bookish and a weakling. You'd think putting a book lover who is also lembik like me would make me like him. But in all honesty, I don't really feel attached towards him. But I was still interested to see how he handled and navigate the situations he was in. Yes, he was still interesting enough. We have him, his best friend, who is the opposite of him, energetic, cheerful, and popular. Arena, who is crush or potential love interest, and the damsel, who is literally in distress. Poor Arena. Then later in the book, we got a character that reminds me of Dumbledore. Tuan Idris is his name, must be the beard. We got a group of other misfits. Jackie acting like the rival for Adan. Hoi, the tall and stoic good-natured male character. Maya, the youngest, brave and flexible girl. And my favorite, even though she doesn't appear much, Kartini, the elder sister or leader like in the group. And I tapped some of her and Maya scenes, especially with the MC, because they're really badasses when it comes to overriding the MC's mansplaining and catching his back. Yes, I enjoyed that. I got a kick out of it, okay? This is not like a jab towards the author, okay? In fact, more like a reminder to myself and to other potential writers as well, when crafting or writing portrayal of abuse and violence towards women, because it has its scenes. And look, I get it, this is FIXI, okay? It's all about the grittiness, gore, and the rawness of human nature. But I believe there is a way author can work trauma, especially towards women, without show don't tell too explicitly. And yes, I get it, it's intended for a mature audience, but with influx of such media portraying or utilizing this portrayal that it becomes a plot device, it starts to breed a new problem. Hear me out. And I'll link some articles from Book Riot and other blogs where they analyze Harley Quinn character in Suicide Squad and compared to Birds of Prey, and I'll borrow his words. Too many movies or stories use sexual violence to perform double duty, to show how threatening the bad guy is, or how the victim has suffered, yes, but also to titillate. Now, this term simply means to excite. I would venture or guess that most aren't even aware that they were titillating. That's just how they view the female body, especially the nude female body. And this is what I get from a certain scene, especially involving Arena, one of the female characters. While it succeeded making me loathe the villains, it also unfortunately succeeded in making me feel uncomfortable. Maybe others don't feel bothered, good on them. And sure, in few of those scenes, Arena for the most part has agency. She put up a fight and we do not dwell too much on these scenes. We're focused on her surviving. But, and not just Arena and the group of females captured and tortured in this story, there were tendency that to deprive the dignity of those women, they have always been with regards to stripping off her clothing or involving the showing of her body. But for once, I would like to read where the author refuses to reward the reader for visualizing a woman being humiliated by making that humiliation attractive. And it refrains from making the audience complicit in the unjust punishment. As in this case, even though we were supposed to be in the headspace of Arena, some of those scenes may interchange, and at times it's as though we are complicit or bersubahat with the villain itself when inflicting such torture on Arena. So, and yes, I understand these things needs to be handled delicately, and because we rarely read or watch trauma or violence on women, they are handled differently. I think a good example in writing to show don't tell with regards to trauma on women is to not focus on the damage that had been done on her body, but the after impact, or use other form of imagery. For movie Birds of Prey, one of the characters, Helena's backstory, is that her entire family was murdered in front of her eyes. And we do see those scenes in the flashbacks, and even Birds of Prey has gore and violence. But the camera effects on the lingering part, so when it comes to the book that I remember reading of Suci, you can tell the writing lingers a lot on the female body. But in vice versa for Birds of Prey, instead of lingering on the wounds of the family that being killed in front of this character Helena's eyes, they focus on Helena herself clutching her toy car as the tool that gets her through the pain. And in book, one of it I can think of is the Six of Crows duology, where one of the female characters, Inish Gaffa, was sold to prostitution. But here's the thing, there's limited scenes about her actual deeds as prostitution. But we as readers could tell that she is very disturbed and traumatized by her former boss and by her work as a prostitute. We as a reader don't need to know the details of being a prostitute, especially when this kind of character consider it a violating moment. It's not that it should have been done, it could, but if given the chance, could be done differently. And if you ask me, it's a mix for Suci, because we're supposed to be in Arena's headspace, as I mentioned before, but at the same time, any awful things happen to her, it can feel at times as though we're complicit with the villains. Sometimes we manage to fight off as though we're Arena, but often it felt like her agency was withheld by the savagery of the villain in this scene. It's a hard angle to take, I understand, but that's just my 2 cents on the matter. Overall, I would give it a 3.5 out of 5. It's still the first in a trilogy series, so it is promising. Look, don't take my word for it. I've seen it been selling well in stores and for good reasons, as I mentioned earlier in the video. I couldn't bump it up to 4 stars because I could guess the storyline, and it's not a bad thing. It's just I'm not super surprised by the revelation of things. So while I didn't super adore the story, I still have a good read overall. I'm satisfied that the MC's main concern in this story was resolved and making room for the next installment for something bigger. Yep, there's potential. That's all from me. Thank you once again, Booktube Malaysia and FIXI, for giving me this opportunity, and thank you for those who stayed this long to watch my rambles. Please give Suci a go and watch other fellow Malaysian booktubers who participate in this collaboration as they give their thoughts on the first series of Suci. Ratings may vary, of course, could be the same with me, or could be better, or could be worse. Bye!